All right, Craig, we're sending you to space.
We can't afford a rocket ship.
I didn't say it's via rocket.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we can probably afford some of that.
I know a giant, and he's just going to basically take him and, like, slingshot him into space. And then he's got to figure it out from there.
Well, this wasn't the worst intro ever, but it was pretty bad.
But it was an intro.
It was something. So we're the Grumpy Dungeon Masters. I'm Grumpy Dungeon Master Jay, the co-host Grumpy Dungeon Master Christopher, and we are joined by a friend of ours, Kristian. Very specifically because we want to talk about Planescape, and he knows everything about Planescape. All of it. Everything.
Wow. All right. No pressure, right?
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure.
You're going to have an answer for everything. So, like, normally when we talk on the podcast and we're like, hey, our D&D friend group says X, Y, and Z, Kristian is one of those people that we are referring to.
Yes, we often communicate with him about D&D or tabletoping in general. So.
And since we both have absolutely no idea what Planescape is outside of, like,
you don't.
Sigil and the City of Brass.
Okay, that's mostly true.
We brought him in as the local expert to tell us all about Planescape. But before we go, I did make a purchase that I want to talk about first.
Oh no!
So you know of the Onslaught, the board game, right?
No.
All right. So there's a D&D board game out there called Onslaught.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So essentially, it's like the 5th edition only miniature combat variant of D&D that they have. There was one 4th edition where they sold basically these little tiny boxes that contain an army in it. And it contained like a battle board, and then you link the battle boards together and you fight your little armies. And
yeah, 2nd edition, it was called Battle System.
Yeah, so they've had them for every system, I believe. So the 5th edition version is called Onslaught. But it's run by WizKids, so the model quality is pretty good, being that the minis you can buy in the random boxes are fairly good right now. And I was watching the Gallant Goblin review this Onslaught faction pack, okay? So the faction pack is basically an additional faction that you can run with the core Onslaught game. I don't have the core Onslaught game yet, but I bought this faction pack because of the miniatures that were inside of it. It was only $40, so it was decently priced. But I got 6 minis out of the deal, which is kind of not the best. But
yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't seem decently priced at all.
But when you look at the kind of minis that are in the box, okay, it just blows it out of the water. Okay. So first off, there is a orc barbarian, standard orc barbarian. He looks pretty cool. The link's in our podcast chat on our Discord if you want to take a look at it. Or you can go to Amazon and look up D&D Onslaught Many Arrows Tribe to also get a picture of what these guys look like. So the big guy, the big leader is an orc, just orc barbarian, what have you. The next is a female orc with like this like leather outfit with a bunch of like bone skulls.
That's an orc? That's a bugbear, man.
No, the female to the right.
Yeah, the one on the left.
Of the orc. No, we'll get to the one on the left. The one to the right of the orc.
Oh, okay. The gray one. I got it.
Yeah. Female orc. It looks pretty cool. But to the left, as you just mentioned, there is a bugbear. There's a female bugbear. And her name is like Gara 2 Axes. Don't count how many axes she has on the model. She has more than 4. But you don't want to argue with her because she has 2 axes. She's Gara 2 Axes. Not 4 axes. Just 2 axes. But a female bugbear model. I have never seen one of those before. I don't know if there is one. I don't think there is. So I was already like, oh wow, dang, that's pretty cool. I'd like to get one of those. And then down below, there is 2 kobolds and a goblin. All right. The one kobold is like some kind of like Circle of the Moon.
I watched
druid.
That video.
Circle of the Moon druid. Kobold looks pretty cool. Has a sickle, green leafy armor. What have
Obviously a druid.
But then the other kobold is a Way of the Open Palm monk.
Yep.
and so like his name is like Steve Glowy Hands or some shit. It's amazing. Then the model is really, really well done. I'm like, oh, I have to get this now. And then the last selling point was the goblin, who's a goblin bard, and it's just this dude, the little goblin with a mohawk. He's just rocking out and has like his like loot with him. And I was like, damn it, now I have to buy this set.
Yeah, he plays heavy metal on a lute. Like, look at that. No, okay, I got to admit, the minis are kind of awesome. I wouldn't pay $40 for it, but they do look good.
I mean, the other like faction army packs you can buy from WizKids are about $40 for
Yeah.
8.
Well, to be
10
fair,
models.
it also comes with all the cards and tokens. Like, it's a board game, so.
Yeah, but I bought it just for the models, and I'm very happy. I can't wait to throw that goblin into my box of goblins and the kobolds with my rest of the kobolds, because I use them all the time
Yeah.
for all these like pickup games and extra D&D games and stuff. So I'm very glad that I have them. And I have a lot of bugbears too, and now having another female bugbear. What was kind of weird though, and I asked my wife about this, and she said that was dumb. I was kind of weird. The female bugbear has giant boobs, and I was like,
Alright.
that doesn't make any sense to me. I would think that it'd be like more like a dog or a cat, where it had like the 6.
Like 8 of them, or 6, or
Yeah.
however many.
That's what I thought like a bugbear would have, but she told me I was stupid and just told me to drop the subject and not bring it up on the podcast, but I did anyways.
Good work.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about that. I like them a lot. I kind of want to get the Onslaught core game because it comes with an adult dragon and a bunch of trolls and stuff. But it's at best it's like $100 on Amazon.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's worth that.
It's the kind of game I would end up buying at some point, probably. But
There's a lot of minis.
Yeah, I mean, I own a number of games already similar to it.
Yeah.
Kristian, do you guys ever use minis when you play D&D?
Oh, you know we do.
I don't know.
Yeah,
like-
definitely.
I mean,
So-
like we barely ever do with my games. Sometimes we do, but
Yeah, most of our playing has been online recently, but yeah, when we were gathering on a table, there was lots of miniatures.
got it.
The other
Go ahead.
The other
Go, Chris.
faction pack for Onslaught is a Red Wizard faction pack.
Okay.
And that one's cool just in the fact that all the wizards that they have are casting spell, and the spell effects are part of the mini. So you have like a sorcerer, like Dragonborn, I think, that's throwing fire, and he's got fire on him, and a necromancer's got necromantic energy and stuff. There's a goblin throwing lightning. It's really the model for the Onslaught is.
Hang on.
fantastic.
Wait. So it's a Red Wizard faction,
Yes,
and there's a Goblin mini.
there is a goblin, Duergar, tiefling,
What?
human, maybe revenant.
You're not describing the Red Wizards.
Yeah.
I understand that. I'm just saying what the faction pack is. There's 2 humans. One looks like he's straight from Conan the Barbarian, and the other one looks like he's actually a revenant, like he's undead or something like that. But there's a Dragonborn, Duergar, tiefling, and a goblin.
Yeah, that's not the Red Wizard faction whatsoever. They might be wizards, but that's where that ends.
They're wizards and they're wearing red.
Yeah, that's the extent of it. They are not part
Different
of the
kind of red
actual-
wizards.
Yeah, different kind of red wizards.
Lowercase red wizards.
It's diet red wizards.
The best part is the picture of the Dragonborn mini that has like the flame in his hand. Looks like it's burning from the top of his head, like he has a fire mohawk. I know that's not what the mini really is, but that's what the picture like is showing off.
Yeah. Speaking of miniature games, before we dive into Planescape, I was scrolling eBay and I came across Warhammer Quest. Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah, I remember that.
I had never heard about this. Like, I'm very familiar with Hero Quest, and apparently that's basically what it is. And it came out mid-90s, I think. And if you can find a complete copy of this thing, it sells for like $1,000.
Well, they still make those actually.
Yeah. There's the new ones, but I'm talking about the original ones. Like I know they did a Kickstarter apparently and released them, but yeah, the original ones completed are worth a buttload of money, and I really want one.
Yeah, the one I know of is called Curse City, and it had just a bunch of like really cool minis. But again, it's Warhammer, so you have to like buy them, paint them, put them together. You have to have artistic skill beyond.
No, you don't.
Yes, you do.
No, you don't. I will absolutely play Warhammer without a single painted mini. I don't give a shit.
Then you're like your whole faction has like -5 to attack.
I
and
don't
damage.
care.
It's not fun.
Yeah, it is. Anyway, I don't play Warhammer anymore. I sold all my stuff. It's too expensive.
He said while buying
That's
Magic the
right.
Gathering cards.
No, I don't buy those either. Mostly because I don't really like where they've gone with Magic, but that's my own opinion.
Come on, Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who. What can go wrong?
Yeah. I'll stick with classic for the moment until something else really grabs my interest.
All right, so let's get into Planescape. So Kristian, as a DM who's basically ran all the modules from 4th and 5th, I know of Planescape. I know of Sigil. I know of the City of Brass. And I know that of like it's in space ? I never honestly quite understood the difference between Planescape and Spelljammer.
They're
being
different.
that everything is a pocket dimension or pocket like universe in the D&D lore or canon, and you could just travel there. So I never understood. So what is Planescape? How is it different than Spelljammer? And I just a quick lore dump on what Planescape is.
So Planescape is takes place on the other planes of existence other than the prime material, which is where Spelljammer is, maybe, depending on which edition you're playing in.
Okay.
But the way they kind of work with all their various other campaign settings is when you come in and say, hey, well, Forgotten Realms says the cosmology looks like this, and Greyhawk says it looks like this, is you come to Planescape and they're like, well, all these people are clearly wrong because they're just idiot prime materials that don't live out here.
Okay.
Accurate, yeah.
So they established the
They removed the Great Wheel and went with something else, but that was the understood cosmology from 2nd edition forward.
Yeah, 2nd edition, even in 3.5, they stuck with the Great Wheel, or 3.5. But so there, and Spelljammer is, I guess, even now with 5th edition, they kind of make this little bit distinction between wild space and then the astral sea, which is the astral plane or the deep astral, which is your connective tissue between the prime material plane and all the worlds of the prime material, which are like your Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, Dark Sun, whatever campaign world's out there, it's out on the prime material.
Okay.
And then they're all connected to the astral plane, and the astral planes is kind of like your gateway to the outer planes, and the ethereal plane is kind of like the same thing, but your gateway to the inner planes, which are the elemental planes. And the outer planes, they kind of mark as these are the planes of philosophy and belief, and the inner planes are the physical reality, the building blocks of physical reality.
Okay. So like I knew like let's just say like Avernus is in a different plane of reality, and the nine hells were like in a separate plane of reality. So that's how they So Planescape is a way of accessing those places.
Yes. So each of the planes are and all the planes are infinite, which is one of the things they talk about out the gate. There's three kind of concepts they throw at you, which is one of them is, they say, okay, well, where's the center of the multiverse? And I say, well, it's kind of a joke because what's the center of an infinite space? You could argue that any given place you're standing is the center because that's the center of your perspective.
Okay.
Yep.
Or nowhere is.
Yeah,
because
even
there
though
is no center to an infinite.
Right, and apparently the spire that Sigil sits upon is also infinite. Yet,
Yes.
if you're standing in the Outlands, you can see it sitting on top.
Yes, the spire is an infinitely tall spire on the infinite plane of the Outlands, but you can always see it, and you can always see Sigil at the top of it.
Yeah, so the whole thing is sort of a joke, and I don't think any of it really matters.
Yeah, it's supposed to kind of be like not everything is supposed to be make sense or be comprehensible. The sometimes called the cage by the residents of it, because the only way into Sigil is portals. You cannot teleport there. You cannot plane shift. No spells that normally allow planar transportation can get you into there or out of there. The only way in or out is through a portal. And
Okay.
in the second edition, at least, all the portals generally you needed a key of some sort to get through a portal. Key, anything from a particular material to the right frame of mind to a scent. So it kind of gave the DM a wide latitude of saying, hey, if you get creative with portal keys, that's a way to kind of make finding the key an adventure or an investigation of some sort. And it's also why the residents of Sigil sometimes refer to it as the cage, because if you don't have access to a portal, you're stuck there.
So how I'm looking at the dungeon master description of Sigil. So Sigil is a place that's hard to get to, right?
It's
It
not
is and
easy.
it isn't.
It is and it isn't.
It's
'Cause
hard to get to from the prime material worlds because, again, only if you happen to stumble upon a portal to get there.
Okay.
So it is difficult in a sense, but the way they kind of build it up in second edition, the Planescape, is that's kind of built as almost kind of like your base of operations. It's the big metropolis in the Outer Planes, and it's a place that adventurers and planeswalkers are going to gather and probably be at frequently.
Okay. So it says here that Sigil is a trader's paradise. So that's why I was asking about how easy it was to get there, and so is it like a big trading metropolis in the
Yeah.
outer Outlands?
Yeah, it's a huge city because it has portals to everywhere. People
Okay.
can come from anywhere and you can get to anywhere, so it's great for merchants or people that need to get to lots of different places.
Okay. And you said it's set atop a spire that's infinitely tall, but it's at the top.
Yeah, the spire is the center, quote unquote, center of an infinite plane, the Outlands.
Okay.
It's also a
Who?
place where I don't know what their lore surrounding it or how much they'll detail the spire itself. But in the second edition books, at the base of the spire, no magic worked
Okay.
whatsoever. So how a weird, city full of portals hovers on top of it, no one knows, and but no magic works to the point where even like gods that would if you would show up at the spire would be stripped of most of their might. They'd still
Okay.
be quote unquote stronger than any mortal, but
Like
Okay.
my guess is maybe not the entirety of the Outlands, but at least the Spire and Sigil itself are almost certainly the Lady of Pain's domain.
I was
And
just
when
about to ask who the Lady of Pain was and
yeah,
why she on the cover.
Well, I'll let Kristian explain who she is, but it just makes sense that it would be her domain, especially if you're able to strip other deities of their powers. Because when a deity, and if they're powerful enough, creates their own domain, they can effectively set parameters for those areas.
Yeah, so the Lady of Pain is the ruler, for lack of a better term, of Sigil, though she doesn't really actively take a hand in like day-to-day government. Maybe protector or owner would be a better term. But she has the power to control all of the portals in Sigil and can bar people from entering and eject people from the city without anything. Like she has barred all deities or anyone of that power level. So like Abyssal Lords and the Nine Lords of Hell and those kind of things from the city. They cannot enter.
Okay.
And she has there's all kinds of description about her, like if her shadow falls along you, you're cut as if by dozens of blades, and she never speaks. She shows up and she can banish people to what's called the mazes, which are a infinitely recursive demi-plane where you just are stuck. You will never starve to death or anything, but you're just stuck there. And theoretically, there's said to be a way out, but who knows if there actually is or not.
Okay.
But she kind of
Yeah.
sets the overarching kind of like rules for Sigil. There's some history and lore where a couple times the factions of Planescape have pushed the boundaries to the point where they got the axe. They talk about there's a couple of places where they call like the Great Upheaval, which was a big conflict of previous factions, not the current day existing ones, but there was a group called the Communals, who were like, fantasy hyper socialists who decided at some point, like, well, if you have to share everything, at some point they made the demand that the Lady of Pain would have to share the power of Sigil with everyone in Sigil. And then the next day, people woke up and they were just gone, all of them, every single one of them gone.
My
That's right.
players were talking about this release, and they were talking about how I guess the Lady of Pain doesn't have a stat block in any of the previous editions.
No
Yeah.
stat block. There's never been anything. It's just she is the Lady of Pain, and yeah, so one of the things they talk about in the intro book of like the DM's Guide to the Planes is like the whole way that they even kind of tell you, like, if your players are coming to play Planescape because you're going to go fight Thor or beat up the Lords of the Nine, like that's not what Planescape is about. And they essentially tell you you're playing the game wrong. This is not just like D&D with bigger monsters. Kind of the whole point of being amidst the planes and being, a plane walker, it's almost kind of this like Shadowrun-esque thing where like you guys are the agents that are finding ways to slip in amongst the big powers that you'll never be able to contend with directly, but you play the shadows and you find ways around the cracks, and you have to be the clever man getting around and bending the rules.
It actually reminds me a good bit of Ravnica. I don't know if you ever picked up those books or not, the Magic the Gathering ones, but Ravnica is effectively also an infinite plane of a city. And it's all these different factions. I want to say there were 9 different factions that were all vying for power, and you were playing members of those factions. And each one, you could set up your campaign however you wanted. You could find a way to make all of the factions, have to work together for a common goal, or you could make them all your players from a single faction. I ran it very, very briefly for a couple of game sessions, and every one of I made all my players. They were from Rakdos, which is in Magic the Gathering terms red and black. They're sort of a chaos carnival. And it was kind of interesting. Unfortunately, I'm ADD and sort of something else piqued my interest more, so I dropped it. But that's definitely what Planescape as a setting kind of reminds me of.
Yeah, there's definitely some parallels there and some similar things. The factions in Sigil are not as all-encompassing as they kind of are in Magic the Gathering. And the reason I said before we started the podcast, I said the number 12 was interesting because in second edition there's 15 factions, and the fact that there's 12 makes me think that they're kind of taking into account like all the different products that happened in second edition, because at the end of second edition
There were there's a big war
yeah,
that wiped
the
out some
last
people.
Planescape product released was called Faction War. Now, they didn't know it was going to be the last at the time. In fact, they thought that they were going to have another one where they were going to tie into that and kind of do the aftermath and some things that would change. Because some of the writers of it talked about, oh no, the way we left it was never supposed to be like the end and the way things were going to stand.
Little did they know TSR was about to fold.
yeah, they did not know that they were about to get cut off at the knees. But so they kind of talked about, like, I've seen the writers talk about and answer questions and stuff online about what it was supposed to happen after. But in that, a bunch of the factions go to war. They eventually all get the boot from the Lady of Pain, who they crossed the line of causing too much chaos in Sigil, and they all get the boot of get out or else. And some of the faction leaders, called factals, the heads of them, say, "Nah, we're not gonna," and then they all get booted to. Well, their members don't know; they just disappear.
Yeah.
And everyone takes that as the message of, okay, yeah, it's time to go. But some of the factions effectively dissolved after that, and so I'm wondering to see if they're going to keep kind of to that, which ones they're going to keep around, and which ones. I wonder if they're going to add any of the new ones. There was also what's called a bunch of sects that were up and coming, philosophy clubs that hadn't quite made the status of faction yet, but were trying to.
Got it. So they might replace some of the previous ones with some of the up and coming ones.
Yeah, because one of the ones that the writers had mentioned, they were actually intending to get rid of some of the factions that had proven to be not as interesting as they had hoped when they started it. And then one of them they were going to pump in there was the Ring Givers. So I'm wondering. I'm interested to see who made the cut and what
One
changed.
ring to rule them all.
No, all the factions they usually had kind of something you could say in like a couple of sentences to give you a sum up, and then but they're all based on some sort of philosophy or some sort of belief, and that's what the factions were. They're called philosophers with clubs. Was the way they put it in the DM's Guide to the Planes.
So the context about the 12 that you were referencing was part of the product read, which I'll read it off here real quick. Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse comes with a plethora of unconventional new player options, choosing from 2 new backgrounds. Ooh, 2 new backgrounds.
Yeah, I got words about that one.
You will be a gate warden influenced by a mysterious planar force, or a planar philosopher who pursues the hidden truths of the multiverse. Channel planar energies with 7 otherworldly feats. Wow, 7.
Oh, a whole 7.
Experiment with intriguing magical spells, probably like 2
There's
or
probably
3.
5 maybe.
And draw inspiration from Sigil's 12 ascendant factions, each with distinct cosmic ideologies. So they're down from 15. Now they have 12.
I mean,
I think that would be okay. Some of the factions were kind of boring, and there was a couple of them that were really similar to each other and didn't really do a great job of making distinct identities. So I think 12 is plenty.
Yeah, like 12, I think I'm with Kristian on this. Like, it's more than enough. If you're playing with the factions, that gives your players plenty of options. If you're using them as bad guys, that's still plenty of bad guys. Like, that's more than enough.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this whole backgrounds thing. There's obviously the numbers that we talked about: 2 backgrounds, 7 feats, and who knows how many spells, because they didn't mention that.
Yes, not a lot.
And I understand they don't want to pump a lot of time and resources into this thing because the new quote unquote edition comes out next year.
Yeah.
So I understand they don't want to put a whole lot into this. Because of that, it also gives me a fear that this will probably be the only thing they ever release for Planescape. Or if it's not, it'll be 5 years later, 6 years later before you see anything else Planescape. So I would personally want to milk this for as much as I could. 2 backgrounds is literally nothing. I personally could create 2 backgrounds and write them up completely within an hour. And I'm not even a professional writer. Like, that's nothing.
Yeah, I honestly would have probably been all right if they just made this a lore book and weren't offering any options. Like
I'd be okay with that, sure.
that would have been fine with me. That seems better than just offering like a paltry sum of them.
Yep.
Like instead of
Well-
just 2, just don't offer any. Just give me more pages of information.
It is truly the settings that make tabletop fun. The system, we talk a lot about systems on here because it is part of tabletop RPGs, but the systems aren't really and truly what matters. Like you could just be making all this stuff up, and as long as you got some set numbers to roll some dice to, everything will work fine. It is the lore and the system, or the lore and the setting that matters. So yeah, if this thing was just 150, 200 pages of just lore, I'd be perfectly okay with that.
So
yeah,
about
I
the,
honestly didn't need the. Go ahead.
I was going to say about the page count. This is a box set. It comes with 3 books. There is the 96-page hardcover book that has all the planar character options, the details on the city of doors, descriptions of the Outlands and the gate towns that lead to the Outer Planes, and more, quote unquote. It has a 96-page hardcover, and then it has a 64-page hardcover book that gives you the monster manual for the planes, which includes inhabitants of the Outer Planes, planar incarnates, hierarch modrons, and time dragons. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty actually excited to see what's in the monster book, and I like that they reference Mort from the game Planescape Torment.
Yes, Mort was the skull, wasn't he?
He was. He was
Yeah.
the skull
God, I hadn't touched that in
from
2
the Pillar of,
decades.
the Pillar of Skulls on the in the Nine Hells.
Who's more?
Mort in the Planescape Torment was probably my favorite of the old school like real time with pause like D&D games. I know that might be heresy since you're supposed to say that Baldur's Gate 2 is the best, but Planescape
I like Baldur's Gate 1 better. So,
but Planescape Torment was my favorite one.
Okay.
And one of the, in fact, the first of the companions you meet along your journey when you wake up is a floating skull named Mort. And he stays with you throughout the game, and he tells you that he's in Planescape. One of the things they detail is there's these floating kind of skulls called mimirs that are repositories of knowledge. It's basically like a fantasy computer, or you can record information into them, and then they can spit it back out. But they're not usually intelligent in and of their own. They can just record and spit out information. Mort tells you that he's an enchanted one of those, and you find out through playing the game that he is lying. And in fact, later when you look in a mirror at some point, there's a tattoo on your back that says "Don't trust the skull."
I never got to play through the entirety of that game, so I did not know about that.
Yeah, at some point you find out that you had left yourself a message. Like the point of the game is you're playing a guy that
Lost his memories. Yeah.
lost his memories, but he's done this several times where he's hard to kill and he loses his memories, and he's had several incarnations. One of them left a note for himself: "Don't trust the skull."
All right.
So I like that there was a little nod to that.
Sorry,
in the name
yeah.
of the Easter.
Yeah, so they've got one lore book with the 2 backgrounds and the couple of feats. They've got one book that's a monster book, and then there's one that's an adventure.
Yeah. I could have personally done without the adventure.
Yep.
But I know that's just a personal thing. I get why they include it. Their adventures have been probably their most popular, best-selling stuff, so I get why they're throwing one in there. People seem to be fans of them. It's just not my bag.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of on the same page there, but I know Waples loves the adventures, so it's probably right up his alley.
I don't know how to deal with that time jump from 10 to 17. Like
I'm kind
that's
of
just
curious to what
weird.
that is, if there's actual like a jump or if there's just sort of like a hey, an addendum of some point where you can come back, or I'm curious to what that's going to end up being.
What time jump are we talking about here?
They mentioned
So
in the adventure that it's from levels like 3 to 10 and
Oh,
then
that. Yeah.
also 17.
Yeah, I saw that. That was
With
incredibly weird.
very little explanation for that, and I just kind of wonder, like, how do they do that? Do they just include somewhere down the line of, hey, way down the line, here's a big like final encounter, big boss fight or something, or are you actually gonna like, are they gonna say, hey, everyone like level up to 17 and you just leap forward into, I don't know.
They heard
that's
everybody complaining that all of their campaigns end by level 10 to 12. So they're like, we're just going to throw a little thing up at level 17 for you guys to play with.
yeah. So one of my players guessed. We were talking about this last night. Dungeon the Mad Mage goes to 20. That's the highest level adventure in 5e. The Tyranny of Dragons goes up to 14 or 15. I think that's the second. Nothing else gets past like 11 or 13 ish. And then this one going up to 17, the player's guess is that the time dragons had something to do with it, and they just advance your character up to level 17 so you can fight the big bad of the adventure. And if that's what it is, that's the person's watching too much anime, for one, because that's a
Yeah.
very anime thing to do.
Yeah,
And
I'd almost rather it be that, because this is just my personal. I don't like long-term playing at the highest levels. It takes everything takes way too much time, or just at the point where players have access to Wish and Miracle and all the highest level stuff. Like, this has been the case, second edition, 3.5, Pathfinder.
yeah,
I've never liked it. It gets over the top and ridiculous. Things either take way too long to fight, or they take way too short. And there's
yeah.
very little middle ground.
My AL group is 7 right now, and it's just ridiculous when I'm running around stuff. When I ran my Al campaign, we ended at 9, and that was ridiculous. It just made the final boss too easy. So, I mean, if it is 10 to a jump to 17 via time magic or something like that, because that
Seems
is
likely.
the rumor that all the spells are going to be time based, then I guess we'll see how it plays out. I mean, it sounds interesting to beat level 17 for a final engagement. But when you're level 14 and you're fighting Tiamat, if you're fighting the Lady of Pain at 17,
I hope
they
not. I hope that they, God Almighty, I hope there's still no statistics for her. She does not need a stat block.
Yeah, that's very important. I I don't think
I
none of the gods need stat blocks.
No, I will be very upset if she has a stat block. That's something that will definitely piss me off real quick.
Well, you said her shadow was basically like you step into it, it's like getting cut by 1,000 knives.
Yeah.
Well, one of the comments I saw from a player commenting on when I ran Planescape in the past, he had a player that was a shadow monk, and it tried to shadow step into the Lady of Pain's shadow.
Ooh,
And then
that sounds like a bad idea.
and guess how that ended? And I'm sitting here like, so she has to have a stat block if
No.
her shadow cuts you like 1,000 knives. How many attacks is it? Is it 1,000 attacks? Or just is the player just dead? I'm guessing the player was just dead.
Yeah. There's no stat block. That's the whole point. Is this is not an entity that you can fight. This is not a boss. This is not a thing that can be combated by PCs. This is
Yeah.
almost like a force of nature.
And I like those. I like those concepts a lot.
Yeah, there was kind of and that's one of her other rules, is that one of the things that will cause her to come down is she will not allow anyone to worship her. Anybody that tries to like profess any sort of like faith or organize any sort of thing gets ruthlessly cut down.
Oh, that was a reference to Mort. Mort's Planar Parade is the monster
Yeah.
manual. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So, what is Fortune's Wheel? Is that anything?
Fortune's Wheel. What are you staring at here?
That would be
The
with
map of the city or the
Arcana Loth book.
That's the adventure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure what they're going to refer to that as. That could be a couple of different things. And there's a place in the City of Doors called Fortune's Wheel, which was I
Okay.
think was like a gambling hall.
That's probably it then. Or at least that's probably where the adventure starts. You might be working for whoever owns the Fortune's Wheel.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. It is. Looking at the map of Sigil, it's right there next to the barracks and the high courts. Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at the map of Sigil just to see what it tells me from might be different and which factions might be around still just by it there because I know which ones are the headquarters of the factions there.
Yeah.
Like the Civic Fest Hall is the Sensate's headquarters. The Shattered Temple is the Athar.
And we had seen the art, we were talking about it yesterday, of the fox-headed being, which you're fairly sure is one of the very specific NPCs that's an Arcana Loth.
That was my guess, maybe, and who knows what they're going to do in 5th edition, man. I wish I could say I had the faith of the team that did this in 2nd edition, but
Yeah, well,
that's what it feels like to me. Is there's two in 2nd edition in the Planescape campaign and in the box set and stuff. There's two prominent Arcana Loths that are specifically named and that are kind of players in the City of Doors. And one of them is a woman that is kind of like a crime lord. She's like the Godfather.
Okay. I'm up for that.
Yeah, like I don't know a whole lot about the Yugoloths in general, but I was reading, I read the book series fairly recently, The War of the Spider Queen, and in the last book, somebody hires an Arcana Loth, I think it was, to basically take an army after the party of adventurers. I guess they were in the Abyss or somewhere.
Yeah, no, I don't see it on the City of Doors map, but in the kind of artwork that got teased when they first announced all of this, the like long piece of art that maybe it's going to be the cover of the book, or the DM Scream, I know, but where they were bringing back their artist, one of the doors, the signs hanging from one of the doors, and it reads "The Friendly Fiend," which is the shop owned by the other prominent Arcana Loth of Planescape lore.
So when I was reading through the Wikipedia about Planescape, one thing that I had never realized, when they went from 1st edition to 2nd edition and everybody was screaming for a manual of the planes, and they sort of released this thing, and they never referred to angelic or demonic creatures, at least initially. Like obviously they're in it. I've got the monster manual floating around, like the succubus is in there and everything, but apparently they don't seem to refer to them as that.
Yeah, there was a period of time they went through, and I don't know if I'm sure. I know somewhere in Planescape they call them like devils and demons and angels and stuff. But there was a period of time in 2nd edition, I think, because some of it was during like the satanic panic and stuff.
Yep.
So they stopped referring to devils and demons and angels and called them like Batazu and Tanari
Right.
and stuff. And they gave them other names so that they could do the thing without having uh people come after them and like wanting to burn them at the stake, essentially.
Yep.
It was we're gonna call it something different until this all dies down.
And then it died down, and now nobody gives two shits.
Yeah, now no one cares, and they started like even in this, they refer to them in places as demons and devils.
Yeah. Oh,
and
but they
stuff.
were back to it well by third edition.
Yeah, so I expect that, but that's the reason why that was there for a while in second edition, because they were trying to survive a bunch of like
Hysteria.
hysteria from religious people that wanted to burn them at the stake for saying, "Oh, this is all witchcraft."
Yep. Oh, I have actively met those people. Like that was a real thing.
Yeah.
I remember one of my friend's mothers, and this was mid 90s, late 90s actually. We were playing Magic the Gathering, and she referred to it as witchcraft and devil worship.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah. People are
am
weird.
I'm cautiously optimistic about this. I think there'll be some good stuff. There'll probably be some things that make me angry if they change too much.
Yeah. I hope the lore holds up. I hope the artwork holds up.
Same.
Because we've talked about it between us before. Artwork really does make settings, and I might subconsciously, that might be why one of the reasons I don't like fifth edition, because I look at all fifth edition art and all of it looks exactly the same. Whereas with second edition, you looked at Dragonlance, you looked at the core stuff, you looked at Planescape, you looked at all of the artwork for Dark Sun, Ravenloft. Every bit of it was different artists, and it all looked very different.
Yeah, they went out of their way to give kind of each of their worlds and campaigns like a very different thematic feel.
Yeah, this is actually in the Wikipedia too on Planescape, and I hadn't thought about it, but it makes perfect sense. So apparently, when they got Zeb Cook to design Planescape and release it, he kind of had free reign, and he went looking for the right art style, and he handed off the idea of the Lady of Pain to one of the artists that worked in house. I'm not finding their name at the moment, but apparently she drew up this one picture of Lady of Pain that sort of set the tone for the whole thing. And Zeb Cook really liked sort of Brian Froud's art style. So then that's when they got Dieter Lisi to sort of mastermind it all.
Yeah. And
Dana Knutson was the person who did the first Lady of Pain art.
okay, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I loved about Planescape is just the art was so the art told you part of the story and kind of set the feel and the tone of it just by looking at it. You kind of could tell like what you were getting yourself into. And I
Yep.
think it was part of the storytelling. And I do agree that fifth edition has definitely lost that by making it all very samey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
like
so the
go
Lady
ahead.
of Pain cover art was done by an artist called Tyler Jacobson, who's an in-house Wizards artist, and he does a lot of Magic the Gathering artwork as well. Linked on our Discord again and the podcast chat channel. I linked his tweet where he showed off his Lady of Pain, and then he also did one of probably more, but he did one of the Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering art pieces where it's a giant battle. And I've linked that there. And he also drew the full art card for Tiamat for the Adventures in Forgotten's Realm release from like last year. And looking at all those, like they're all freaking amazing and just spot on with exactly how I depict fantasy artwork to look.
Yeah, and let's be clear. Like I'm not shitting on any of the 5e artists because they do fantastic art.
Purple Owlbear.
Well, other than the Purple Owlbear, I'll shit on that guy.
No, he was great.
No, I'm kidding.
I talked to him personally. He's amazing. He told me why it's a Purple Owlbear. I think I talked about that on the podcast, right?
Yeah, we did.
Okay,
I'm completely kidding. But if you
kitty sharks.
Yeah, but if you look at the second edition art, all of the settings were incredibly different. And 5e unfortunately does not have that. They've got great artists, but all of the art looks very similar. I can't look at anybody's art in 5e and say that's this guy. because it's just not there. I can look and tell you that's Larry Elmore. I can look and say that's Brahm. That's Tony DiTerlizzi. Like, these are very, very obvious artists who have their own style.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. They went out of the way to say, hey, to find an artist whose style matched what they wanted for the setting, instead of trying to say, hey, we'll find a good artist and just tell you we want it to look like this. Like, I agree. The fifth edition art it's not that it's bad art. It is good. I love some of the art pieces for it and some of the art that they did for the like Adventures in the Forgotten Realms Magic set. Some of the art is fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has that. It's made like they're bringing their art to be D&D instead of saying, hey, we're going to take D&D in the direction of our art.
Yep. And Planescape has a unique feel to it. Like I said, it was taken from Brian Froud's sort of style.
Yeah, they took
art.
inspiration from him.
Right.
They really liked his style, and they wanted something similar.
And if you're not familiar with Brian Froud, he's the primary artist for Labyrinth, the movie Labyrinth. He was the primary artist for the movie The Dark Crystal. And if you go back and watch those Jim Henson products, man, they are weird and they are kind of creepy looking.
Yep. Yeah, and the art really made a big thing for Planescape. So I'm a little apprehensive, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I see the art that you've linked, and yeah, like that. Yeah, it's all 5e art, and it all is nice, but it all looks very, very similar. I mean, I guess to be fair, that is the same guy, but
yeah.
But I can't tell you. I couldn't tell you that guy's art from anyone else's.
But we'll see. Looking at the map of the Outlands, it's very similar to the second edition map.
That's good.
Okay.
That's a positive.
What is Wonderhome?
That's something that's different. That's different, and I want to say that's probably I'm gonna guess that's a Divine Realm, and they're probably added a lot more Forgotten Realms centric stuff in here, because that's the default in the main setting of D&D. So I'm guessing they've made it that more prominent than it was in their original Planescape, where they took more of the gods of the Forgotten Realms are out there on the plains, but they took a more comprehensive view, and there was a lot more reference to the mythologies of all over the world, like Norse, Egyptian, Celtic, Chinese, Japanese, and they had references to all of it all over the place. There's still some of that here. Like, I can see some of the Egyptian realms here in the Outlands.
Why is Tatooine on this map?
What?
So if you look at the Outlands map, and I'll post the podcast chat here too. So
I'm trying to find the map, so send it my way.
If you look at where Fortitude and Automata.
Yeah.
So if you look from Fortitude, you go
Arcadia.
down to the right. Okay, that's a Sarlacc pit, and you keep going down to the right. That's Jabba's palace. Okay, it looks like it's a desert scene, and then there's like a crab-like thing with a city on its back, which I don't know. That's Jawa, I guess. I don't know. Why is Tatooine on this map?
No, the desert's supposed to be there.
That's Tatooine, though. There's a Sarlacc pit, and there's Jabba's
Look at the name of the river. The River Mott. That's the Egyptian River of Truth.
So tell me the truth. Why is Tatooine on this map?
There's supposed to be a desert there. It's there in second edition.
So this is actually kind of interesting for me. I have never actually seen the map before of the Outlands. I was not super familiar with it in general, and I thought the majority of it. I thought you had Sigil that sat on the spire, and the Outlands, in my mind, because I had never read through the book, was just a barren wasteland. And basically Sigil was where the campaign takes place, and then you go to these other places like Arcadia or Mechanus. But apparently, from looking at this map, no, the Outlands is really where this thing sort of takes place.
Yeah, and that was the original box set for Planescape before they, did all the expansions that gave more details to the planes. The original focused on Sigil and the Outlands and the Gate Towns. which seems to be mostly what they're duplicating here. They'll probably give you a blurb about the other planes like they did in the original box set, but
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
and
So-
this map is definitely more busy than the second
Yeah.
edition map of the Outlands. It's
This
more
map
compact
reminds
and
me of like those
busier.
old. Yeah, this map reminds me of like those old like shipping maps or
Yes.
whatnot that you see in
Yes,
fantasy
it does.
books, where it would have like all these extra creatures drawn on it. Because like if you look at the very north where Trade Gate is,
Mm-hmm.
It's an
just to
eye.
just to the left of Trade Gate, there's like this robot on wheels. Okay,
There's something there.
he's like, so it looks like he's screaming and just like rolling around the landscape there. But
It's
if you were to
Chopper.
keep him,
He looks like Chopper.
he looks like Chopper, yeah. But if you were to keep him to scale, man, he could just run over any of these cities.
And
Yeah.
Trade Gate actually looks like a starfish with a giant eye. From like, what was the enemy from Suicide Squad? That's what he looks like.
Yeah.
Star you.
Yeah.
So yeah,
They
I
got
like
the yellow
all,
submarine.
all the
up
gate
north.
towns are there. They do a pretty good job of, I think, representing kind of what they're supposed to look like from their descriptions in the original one.
I wonder if that robot is to scale because there's a red dragon drawn down here too.
I doubt
Near
any of it's to scale.
Zeos.
Nah,
And
none of
he's-
it's going to
he's
be
like-
to scale.
He's just chilling there, and then the Beetlejuice worm is swimming in the bog.
Now I will say if whether he's to scale, whether he really exists, whether they write anything else about him, Chris, if you ever run this, players have to encounter that. He's just a
So,
kaiju robot. Just
Yeah, I'm wondering. Yeah, so this is a lot busier, but your original thoughts in the Outlands aren't entirely wrong. They're definitely not correct, but so it wasn't a desolate wasteland. It was.
Obviously.
They describe it as a vast hinterland, but there are lots of realms of deities, and then there are the gate towns at the quote unquote edges that lead to each of the other outer planes.
got it.
So, you said magic originally didn't work at the bottom of the spire.
At the very base of it, and it's the where the magic starts to fall off. Like as you would get closer, certain magics would start to fail. Like
Wild magics for a while.
and then but it was very nebulous where it was. There's no real lines drawn on it of where it is, and they just kind of leave it to your discretion. And there's no, one of the things they never gave in any of the maps was there's no distance scale, because there is no distance on an infinite plane, so everything's just sort of like
Vaguely in that direction.
vaguely in that direction. Yeah.
It's
And
on
some of the planes
Yeah, go ahead.
some of the planes they kind of talk to you like about like how you get around on an infinite plane, and some of it varies. Like I think it's it might either be Bitopia or Arcadia, where like to travel, like you have to do good deeds or you never get anywhere. And that's the only way you could actually like make progress to where you're getting. You have to do certain amounts of good deeds. And it's otherwise you could walk forever, but you'll never actually go anywhere if you're not doing good deeds.
Huh.
Because it's one of the upper planes. It's one of the good. It's like the plane of like
Yeah, yeah.
communal good or community good, and you like to if you want to travel, like you gotta help people and stop and do good things and like plant trees. And they just talk about like otherwise like you'll walk through these golden fields of wheat, everything's fine, and you realize like wow we traveled for 12 hours and we haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah, but Bitopia, I think, was the plane of the halflings as well. Like, I think that's where, when halflings die, their god resides there, so they end up there.
Yeah, several of the halfling and gnomish gods are on Bitopia.
Yeah, that was also covered in the those novels, the War of the Spider Queen. One of the characters got banished and ended up on Bitopia,
Yeah.
hanging out with halflings all day.
Yep. So it's all the planes have their own kind of like quirks, and that was one of the things they would talk about is like how do you survive? How can you get around on planes? Like each plane also had a different effect on magic. Like some spells would not work, and some things or some spells would.
So actually talking about that, like one of the things I was really hoping that Spelljammer would have would be they would bring over in 5e was the phlogiston.
Yep, phlogiston.
Yeah.
glad they didn't.
A lot of people are glad
I
they
wish
didn't,
they
but
did.
I like the concept of like that's the primary highway through the astral sea and stuff, and how like you couldn't do certain things in there, or everything would explode, and your access to the gods and God's power is very limited there. And I was looking at the DM's guide while you were talking, and I was just looking at Mechanicus, because the Modrons are going to be looking like they're going to be pretty popular again. There just seems to be a lot of them in the artwork for this Planescape box. And I was going to ask you, is like I see that just all these outer planes have all these optional rules attached to them. So like for a Mechanicus, like all when on Mechanicus, creatures always use the average damage result for attacks and spells. For example, an attack that normally deals 1d10 plus 5 will always deal 10 damage. So
That
I was wondering, I was going to ask if there's like weird, unique rules for each outer plane location, and it seems to be. So
Yes, there
answered
were.
my question.
Yeah, I can't speak for Planescape, but I know for sure in the manual of the planes from third edition, it had. I wouldn't even say they're optional rules. These were just rules of how the planes operate. If you're in Mechanus, everything might be sanctuaried, or one of those places might just have sanctuary running at all times. So you have to make a will save just to attack anything. Like that's just
Yeah.
sort of how all the planes were.
Yeah, it's that way, and it was that way in Planescape in second edition. Each of the planes had certain conditions that they were there, and certain rules to whether they were to travel, to survive, to the ways they affected magic. They all had their unique takes, and that was one of the things why they make a big deal in Planescaper of like if you call yourself a planeswalker, like that meant something, that was a term of respect there, because it meant you had the knowledge and the ability to make it to multiple other planes and get back alive, and that was a big deal.
Yeah, be totally honest here. I'm actually quite surprised they didn't integrate. I can't speak tonight, guys. I apologize.
I know
They
you kept
didn't
calling it
integrate.
Mechanica.
I know, right? They didn't
Integrate.
integrate. Yeah, I'm sorry. I
You're
can't
fine.
speak today.
Integrate. Got it.
The Magic the Gathering settings into this. I'm glad that they didn't, but I'm
Me too.
surprised that they didn't.
Most people don't consider them part of it.
I know, but in Infinite Planescape, especially when you're confusing terms together like Planeswalker, I'm
Yeah.
surprised that they did it, especially since they just kind of like did a soft reset on their Planescape in Magic the Gathering. Like throw in like Ravnica, like you mentioned earlier, that would have worked at this point in time. Strixhaven,
I mean, you can
other
always
current settings like Theros, like these are books that are already out there. I'm
if
Yeah,
surprised.
and the way that I would probably integrate them is, hey, these are other prime material worlds that are out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I was going to say if somebody really wants to integrate them, they do it via Spelljammer, because whereas Planescape, it's literally designed to go to the inner and outer planes primarily. It's not focused on any of the prime material planes. Not that you can't get
Yeah.
there from here, but that's not the focus of it. But Spelljammer, it's the exact opposite. It is the focus of how to get from one prime to another prime
Yes.
via spaceships.
via spaceship with a special
Yeah.
seat in there.
That was always the focus was never on the prime material worlds. They mentioned them, they're all out there, and there's, any number of prime worlds. In fact, one of the factions came from a prime material world. The Harmonium
So do they?
unified their prime material world, and then they traveled to the planes to spread their philosophy.
So this book is definitely not going to cover any of the inner planes then too, right?
I don't suspect it will. They might
Okay.
mention that they're out there, but the original Planescape book didn't really cover the inner planes. It was mostly focused on the outer planes. They might, if they go the same route they went with kind of the original box set, you might get like the couple paragraphs descriptions of each of the inner planes, and that might be it.
Yeah. Very, very quickly, sort of diving back on the art subject, I will say, at least looking at this map that's in front of me, this is the new map that's coming out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually like this art style. This is much more akin to the original art.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
this gives me some hope.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like a Forgotten Realms map.
No, it does not. It actually looks similar to the second edition stuff. So
Yep.
let's hope they do a lot more like that in the art of the book.
That's what I'm hoping.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've answered all our questions and have a good understanding of the Planescape now. I'm very interested in what you think, Kristian, of the book when it gets released. So we're gonna have you back on when the book does come out after you have a chance to look it over and tell us exactly how they fucked everything up or how they nailed everything perfectly.
Yeah, I will definitely be interested to talk about the book and what they got right and what they got wrong when it comes out, because this is one that is close to my heart, and this is my favorite setting from D&D of all time. Of all the settings they've released, this was always my favorite. So I will be
Yep.
yeah, I'll have opinions.
Maybe you'll actually get to talk about this one, whereas I barely got to talk about Dragonlance because it was so terrible.
I hope that it's not the case that it's just so terrible that all I can do is rant and rage, but I'm hoping to find at least some.
That's kind of the purpose of this podcast.
That's our
if it is, then hey, I'll be ready for it.
Also, I'd love to hear you rant and rage about something.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard him rant and rave about anything.
It happens.
All right, Kristian. Well, thank you again for coming out and telling us everything about Planescape, and it definitely seems very interesting. I'm excited for it, and I hope it meets your expectations.
Probably not, but we'll see when it comes out. Thanks for having me, guys.
Lower your expectations just a little bit, and then see if it meets that level.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Thanks for joining us, man. We'll do it again soon.
Excellent.
Say bye, Craig.
Bye, Craig.